Yes, never play to the gallery. I think, but you never learn that until much later on, I think. But never work for other people at what you do. Always remember that the reason that you initially started working was that there was something inside yourself that you felt that if you could manifest it in some way, you would understand more about yourself and how you coexist with the rest of society. And I think it's terribly dangerous for an artist to fulfill other people's expectations. I think they generally produce their worst work when they do that. And the other thing I would say is that if you feel safe in the area that you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting.
Oof. Who is Riss? That's a really good question. Riss is a work in progress. It's been a long time coming. I was raised in Wyandotte, which is not too far from here, and I lived there till I turned 20-ish. I went to a pretty white high school, and I had creative outlets, but they weren't like anything super crazy. I kind of felt stuck where I lived. So then when I came here, I started to feel more like Riss, like more like me and more like the person that I'm supposed to be, but it took a very long time to get there. And now Riss is happening. They are a person. I'm a photographer and graphic designer. I'm a plant parent to 10, I think, if I'm counting correctly. I am highly caffeinated. I'm just a person doing my best. That's it. That's it. That's what it is. I got my first camera in 2010, I think. I was headed to 2011. I was headed to my the field trip that we went on that year was New York, and so up until that point I had been shooting on disposable cameras. Every time there was like a field trip or like I was going somewhere big, I would usually take a disposable with me because that was what it was. And then in 2011 I got my first digital camera. It was a point and shoot purple Polaroid. And I took that to New York with me on my class trip, and I just took pictures of everything. Everything that I could find I took photos of. The yellow taxis and the billboards, and just me and my friends being really goofy. And I never really expanded on that. I kind of just thought, okay, this is something that I like. These are moments that I want to capture, but it was never anything more than that. And then in years following is when it sort of started to pick up. So by like 8th or 9th grade, I started carrying my camera more, and then I upgraded from the purple point shoot that I had to a Canon PowerShot, which is like a little bit fancier, but not really, didn't detach or anything, wasn't like a DLSR, but I started trying to do more intense things with that. So I was put on committees that took photos of like sports teams in my middle school and things like that. And again, I never really did too much more than that. I never really took on any photo shoots or anything. And then my sophomore year of high school, I was approached to join the yearbook. And I was kind of like, it's probably not my thing. Like, I'm not much of a writer. But if you're looking for someone to shoot, then I can do that. And that's kind of where it really started, when I picked up like my first like real life camera, and started to kind of get my eye and start developing things from there. Skills that I didn't really know that I had at the time, or that I just thought were normal for most folks. And from that point forward was when it kind of blew up for me. And I had, you know, teachers that saw that and kind of pushed me to do better. And so in high school I was shooting like every big event from prom king and queen to, you know, Friday Night Football. And then when I graduated, it kind of died off. I didn't really have anything to shoot for. It wasn't an assignment anymore. And so my camera kind of stayed tucked away for a while, probably like a year, where I just didn't really touch it because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't really, landscapes were boring at that point. There were people who were asking me to take their senior pictures or like weddings and things, and I wasn't super confident, and so I just didn't take anybody up on their offer, and my camera just kind of sat in its bag for a while. And then in the summer of 2016, I think, so about a year and a half after I graduated, I was working in a coffee shop, and they often did live music upstairs. And so I had just like on a fluke was like, hey, I have a camera, do you mind if I document this? Is that cool with the bands? Is that cool with the venue? And they said, yeah, sure, bring it out. And so I did. And that was kind of when it all started over for me of, you know, why am I doing this? What do I do it for? And I really got to kind of define the things that I like to shoot. And so from that point forward, it was, you know, complete game changer. I shot that one show of a few bands, and then I continued to shoot for the shop, and then here we are, you know, 2 years later, just kind of rolling with the punches and trying to capture everything. But there was a moment where it was kind of like, well, there's nothing to shoot, or so I thought at the time. It's really hard to look at someone and be like, yeah, I'm a photographer. Because they're like, yeah, me too. It's like, you know, this day and age, people think like, well, I have an iPhone X and it has portrait mode, and so I'm just gonna, you know, that I'm a photographer now, or, you know, I have an Instagram. And that was kind of something that I struggled with for a long time, was a lot of folks that I knew had decent working cameras and were charging other folks, you know, loads of money to take their photo, without really understanding or having any background or passion for anything. And it just kind of became this weird money pit. And so the hardest part for me is trying to distinguish myself from everyone else. When in 2018, everyone thinks that they're a photographer. That's the hardest part for me. Outside of that, or in conjunction with that, because there's a surplus of folks that think that they're photographers, you kind of get burned out. You're kind of like, okay, well, what's the difference between my work and their work? Or what's the difference, you know, why am I any better than this person? So for me, it's a challenge of constantly reminding myself of why I shoot and why I do what I do. Because in 2018, you know, you hashtag photographer and you look through things, and, you know, everybody and their mom thinks that what they're doing is photography. And to some degree, I try not to be like, oh, well, I'm the best, because by no means am I the best. But at the same time, I see it, right? I see that everyone has to start somewhere, and if that's where you want to start, that's great. But it makes it challenging for other folks like myself who are kind of trying to actually do things. And it's not just like a one-stop thing for me. I feel like for some people it's like, I have this expensive camera, I take pictures sometimes, you know, and there is nothing, there's no thought about composition, or, you know, what you're doing it for, or who you're doing it for, or how you interact with the world around you, when you're those people, if that makes sense. Not trying to be like, I'm better than you, but like trying to put myself out there confidently and tell myself like what I'm doing matters, you know, when there's a surplus of other people doing the same thing. Yeah. I would say that's the hardest part. Getting yourself out there when there's a lot of other folks doing the same thing, and continuing to shoot even when you don't want to. Yeah. Unfortunately. I've never been a conventional person. And so the idea of having to shoot a particular way to please another person has never really been on my radar. And so, for instance, I didn't go to school for photography. I purposely did not go into art in university because I knew that someone was going to tell me that what I was doing was not right. And so something that I had learned to love over all these years and make my own was then going to be taken away from me because it wasn't right, or it wasn't sound, or it wasn't technically proper. And so when it comes to how I play into my own work, I kind of just play outside the lines, right? Like, I don't let anybody tell me that something has to look a certain way or feel a certain way, or, you know, make them feel a certain way, because I'm not making art for you. Like, it's not for you, it's for me. And so you can love this image or you could hate this image, but at the end of the day, the image is mine. And so I like to think that, like, my unconventionality and my kind of, like, edgy, I don't like that word, but, like, my individuality, rather, I think comes through in my work. And like you said, any, like, struggles that I've had, or, like, weird off-the-wall ideas that I've had, kind of poke through sometimes, whether it be like a really strange edit or like a really weird angle. Learning to look at things in a different way for me has been really big, and I think that at the core of it is what it's about, is perspective for me, because I really like to play into the idea that I don't see the world the same way as other people do, and my lens is just an extension of that. They always talk about, you have the eye for, you know, the eye for art or whatever. And I think to a point that's true, and everything else that you do is just a tool to enhance that, you know? Like, you probably have your filmmaker brain already in your brain, and then your camera is just a tool to help you get there. I like to think of my camera the same way. You know, I see the world in a certain way, and my camera just helps me capture those things. It's just another tool to manipulate and make my own. This is the thing about art, though. Like, no matter how many times you try to say, I'm not gonna be influenced by other people, that's a bunch of garbage. Literally every single thing that you encounter on a daily basis affects you. And so to even try to say, well, I'm not gonna be influenced by that thing, like, you are, subconsciously, whether you think that you are or not. And more or less, most art is just other art mixed up with your own twist, but it probably came from somewhere else to begin with. So yeah, I do have photographers that I you know, look to or think are great, and they're not really older photographers. I mean, Warhol will always be out there because it's Andy Warhol, like, you know, Francesca Woodman, and she did a lot of self-portraits, and I hate self-portraits. I hate them. I can't stand being on the opposite side of the camera, but her work is just amazing. She photographs herself in such odd, like, contorted, really beautiful black and white film stuff that is just amazing. So I've recently gotten more interested in her work and trying to get over that fear of self-portraits. A lot of music photographers that I look up to, because that's really what I like, is music photography. Ashley Osborne is a big one. She's really great. Another one is He goes by Alan Caius. He's really cool. He does a lot of, he actually made the magazine, a magazine of music photography, and he's very, very good. So those are some folks that I kind of pull from. In general, not so much that I base my work off of, but more that there are real people in the world doing real things with this, and this can be more than just something that I do in my free time. In addition to the fact that they just make really sound, different work. So those are just a few folks that I would say. I would love, just like anyone else, to pack a bag. Just me, my camera, some clothes, and enough money to do what I need to do, and just travel for a while and kind of capture what I can. But in the long run, I'd like to either be a in-house photographer for a band, or go in the route of advertising or marketing for a company, preferably a smaller company, a mom and pop type thing, and do work that way, whether it be like products or it be home and garden type things. I'm really interested in like magazine work, magazine layout stuff, both the design factor of it and the photo factors of it. So long term, I would love to end up somewhere like that, but I'm not quite sure. At this point, I'm just kind of rolling with the punches, and taking the opportunities that come to me or that I sought out. This summer, I was asked to shoot a dance recital for someone that I had graduated high school with. And she had reached out to me and said, hey, our photographer is no longer available. I'd like to stick with someone local. Can you do this for me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I was already kind of nervous about it because, like I had said before, I have a hard time. I'm the first person to encourage other people to charge people or encourage other people to try to make a profit on things they love. But I'm the last person to let myself do it. And so I had a really hard time wrapping my head around the fact that I was going to make a profit off of this. That was weird for me. And so I was already kind of nervous about the situation. And the lighting in this venue was so miserable. It was blue and red and green and just all of the colors that are just like photography nightmare to try to adjust later. And my lens was being really goofy, like it wanted to focus, no matter if it was on manual or auto, it didn't want to focus on people, which was problematic because it's a dance recital. And it took me, I was sitting there, and it's dance, right? It's fast. Like this is not like a, okay, pose and smile. Like these folks are running through, 3-minute routines, and if they do it well, they only ran through it one time. So I only had so much time to get what I needed. And so I just remember sitting there like, oh, why? Like, why? Like, I can't do this. I'm not skilled enough. I don't have the equipment that I need. This was a terrible decision. And looking back on it now, like, the images turned out fine. She liked them. That was good. And I was able to recover a lot of them through, color correction and in other post things. But there was a moment where I was just sitting on the floor in this dance recital, all these dance moms behind me, expecting me to take beautiful photos of their children, and having moments of like, maybe I should just go home and tell them that I can't do it. I also think that was a turning point for me of like, okay, if this is something that you're going to do, be transparent with folks about your skills that you do have, and run with that. So the person that I was shooting for knew that the background that I had and the struggles that I had when I was there, and I was very transparent about all those things, and in the end it turned out fine. But during the actual shoot, I was like, no, nope, not today. So that was a big yikes. And then another big yikes was I was a second shooter on a wedding once, and we were shooting at a church in Detroit, one that's sort of near Comerica Park, more or less. And again, another lighting situation that I was like, these people are getting married. Like, they want photos of them getting married, and it was so hard. And then the woman that I was talking to, or the woman that was like in charge of the church, more or less, told me that I basically couldn't stand where I was standing in like the middle of the ceremony, was like, you can't be here anymore, and like made me move. And so I missed like a large portion of the ceremony. Luckily I was second shooting, so it was okay, but I still felt like I was super slacking because I had just been kicked out of the spot that I had chosen to stand and missed a massive part of the ceremony, and it was dark and grainy and gross. Again though, looking back on it, those photos are fine. One thing that I do is I'm super hard on myself for no reason. So all of those moments that are, you know, normal, regular people moments, I blow up a little bit. So those are two like big yikes that kind of were like, I have to look at them as learning experiences, right? Like how you handle the situation says more about you than not. So worked out fine, but in the moment, not so hot. My advice to folks that are starting out would be yeah, definitely that it's okay to be your own person, whoever that is, but also at the same time to understand that may change, and you know, where you start is probably not where you're going to end up, and that's totally okay because you're human and people change. And your ideas change and your views change, and that's totally cool. Work with that to the best of your ability. In addition to that, I would also say, like, just never stop shooting. For me, that year off didn't really do anything, the year between high school and when I started shooting again. And there were opportunities all over that I should have been taking that I didn't, because I was lacking in myself and in my own confidence. So I would say, even if it's one photo a day, make sure that you are keeping that muscle memory and that reason of why you do what you do. And even when the reason for what you're doing is not apparent, it might come back to you later. But don't give up on it, which is super cliche and lame, but it is what it is. And then I would also say, this is a weird one, but I would also say, like, never, if you're shooting digitally, like, never erase anything, because something that you might think is not so great, you know, looking back later with a different perspective may be completely different than what it was intentionally, or what it had looked like at first. So those would be the three, of like, don't stop shooting, don't erase anything, and I don't remember my first one.
It's okay to be yourself.
Yeah. I just had the Office moment. Like, I just looked straight at the camera like, I don't fucking know what I said. Yeah, yep, those are the things. So I don't know. I think that those, for me, I wish someone would have told me when I was younger, like, hey, you can actually do this thing. Because I think that it was something that I enjoyed, and something that I probably could have started actively pursuing a lot sooner than I did. Like, I probably definitely could have started shooting, you know, late middle school, early high school, but instead I waited almost 3 years. I was almost a junior in high school by the time I started to actually pursue and, like, learn and look at photography in a different light, and that's because up until that point I just didn't think that I was good enough to do that. So my thing would be, you know, metaphorically take the bull by the horns, but you know, try it. If it doesn't work, try it again. If it doesn't work, pick something else. But everybody has something, you just gotta find it.
I've often wondered if actually being an artist in any way, any nature, is a kind of a sign of a certain kind of dysfunction, a social dysfunctionalism anyway. It's an extraordinary thing to want to do, to express yourself in such rarefied terms. I think I think it's a loony kind of thing to want to do. I think the saner and rational approach to life is to survive steadfastly and create a protective home and create a warm, loving environment for one's family and get food for them. That's about it. That's actually all. Anything else is extra. All culture is extra.